Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast. Let's keep week 55 going with today's Tolkien Tuesday. Now, yeah, I am looking forward to getting back to the revised and expanded edition of Tolkien's Letters next series. But I'm also really enjoying the time that we've invested in this deep dive into Humphrey Carpenter's book, The Inklings. Now, today I'm still in the chapter, A Fox That Isn't There. This time, though, I'm going to be looking at how Carpenter portrays not the differences, but the friendships themselves. And that's how he leads into this section, suggesting, should we not rather ask, what sort of friends were they? And yeah, it feels about time to do precisely that. Carpenter begins by pointing out that the concept of unofficial or semi-official clubs was not merely ordinary, but rather typical. He points out that Tolkien himself created what he calls a short-lived dining club when he was an undergraduate. That would be the Chequers Club, a dining society that he and Colin Cullis founded in Hilary Term. Hilary Term is the second academic term at Oxford. It runs from January to March, and he did that in 1914. Christina Scull and Wayne Hammond surmised that many of the members of the Chequers Club had also been part of the Apollostics, a literary club that Tolkien also founded 2 years prior in 1912. And of course, we're familiar with the Tea Club and Barovian Society, the TCBS, that formed such a central part of Tolkien's younger days. That wasn't just Tolkien, of course. Hugo Dyson, another member of the Inklings, was, according to Carpenter, one of a group of undergraduates who met informally at an Oxford public house to read Elizabethan plays. These meetings were initiated by Sir Walter Raleigh, the then professor of English literature, and were often visited by literary nobles. Now, Carpenter suggests that in some ways the Inklings were just another Oxford club, but he includes a revealing footnote to that point. Robert Havard, who we talked about back in week 32's Tolkien Tuesday, known as the Red Admiral or the Useless Quack, he wrote a letter to Carpenter as he was preparing the book. Now, he explained that the Inklings really had no corporate existence. In my view, he says, we were simply a group of C.S. Lewis's wide circle of friends who lived near enough to meet together fairly regularly. I think perhaps this should be made clear, as there does seem to be some tendency to take us all much more seriously than we took ourselves. And it's the context of them being Lewis's friends that Carpenter continues, talking about Lewis and his perception of friendship. Specifically, how his early friendship with his brother Warnie, combined with persecution at their preparatory school and by the difficulties of home life in Belfast, shaped the way he would view friendships going forward. Carpenter quotes Lewis from his autobiography as saying, "We stood foursquare against the common enemy. I suspect that this pattern, occurring twice and so early in my life, has unduly biased my whole outlook. To this day," Lewis writes, "the vision of the world which comes most naturally to me is one in which we two or we few, and in a sense we happy few, stand together against something stronger and larger." Well, that something stronger and larger for Lewis often took the form of what he would later call the inner ring, the name of an essay that he wrote about these unofficial cliques. He contrasts them with official hierarchies like one might find in the military. He writes that a group like this isn't, quote, even a formally organized secret society with officers and rules which you would be told after you had been admitted. You were never formally and explicitly admitted by anyone. You discover gradually, in almost indefinable ways, that it exists and you are outside it. And then later, perhaps, that you are inside it. It is not constant. It is not easy, even at a given moment, to say who is inside and who is outside. Some people are obviously in and some are obviously out, but there are several on the borderline. People think they are in it after they have in fact been pushed out of it, or before they have been allowed in. This provides great amusement for those who are really inside. Now, I'm sure most of us, having experienced everything from high school to college to the workplace, could agree with his take. We've all been both on the outside and inside of these informal groups. In a letter to his father, referenced by Carpenter, Lewis actually describes university life as a holy terror of coteries. And so, according to Carpenter, Lewis began to build his own coterie around himself, one that included Owen Barfield. And later, after finding the literature camp to be an inner ring of sorts, he formed his own clique with Tolkien, one we talked about when we first looked into the Lit-Lang divide a couple of series back, a group that, as Carpenter writes, actually managed to change the direction of the whole English faculty. But as Carpenter points out, this group, the nucleus of the Inklings, bore certain resemblances to those inner rings which Lewis described with such detestation. And for this, he goes to Warnie Lewis, who kept notes about the Inklings meetings. He writes, "There were no rules, officers, agendas, or formal elections," Warnie Lewis declared of the Inklings. And as Carpenter writes, the words are noticeably reminiscent of what his brother had to say about the inner ring. Nor is it even a formally organized secret society with officers and rules. Carpenter goes back to Warnie. "From time to time, we added to our original number, but without formalities. Compare that with, you were never formally admitted by anyone. And as for the indefinable membership of the inner ring, it is not easy to say who is inside and who is outside. Nothing could be more characteristic of the Inklings." In fact, Carpenter points out some rather blatant hostility that this inner ring of Inklings held for outsiders. Warnie Lewis writes, "Jack and I much concerned this evening by the gate crashing of unnamed person. Tollers, the ass, brought him here last Thursday, and he has apparently now elected himself an Inkling." I like that. That's funny stuff right there. In the end, though, the way Lewis describes the inner ring that he talked about in his essay is that it is the desire for power that holds that inner ring together instead of friendship, true friendship. And that is how Carpenter can conclude it was this which chiefly distinguished the Inklings from such power groups, for friendship was the foundation upon which the group rested. And next week, we're going to take a look at the nature of friendship, particularly between Oxford Dons in this time. For now, though, this wraps up this week's Tolkien Tuesday. Be sure to join me again next week for more on the Inklings as we look at some of Lewis's thoughts about male friendships. In the meantime, please visit patreon.com/Tolkien Times to learn how you can join the Content Council and be a part of deciding what I talk about. You also can support the show, get an ad-free feed, a bonus episode every week. And join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times for Word Nerd Wednesday. Finally, if you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Follow or subscribe in your podcast apps, leave reviews wherever possible, and follow @Tolkien Times on social media. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.